Young storytellers and filmmakers have gathered in Durban for the Nature, Environment and Wildlife Filmmakers Congress. The event, which is being hosted in partnership with the National Geographic, is themed Africa Refocused and is aimed at empowering young people from Africa to tell their own stories about environmental conservation. Karinda Jagmohan joins me now live from that event. Karinda, thank you for making time. What's the latest from the Congress?
Indeed. Well, today we heard from young storytellers from Zambia about their experiences in speaking about environmental conservation, their experiences and the impact this has on their own wildlife. It's an important conference that is taking place here, and I'm joined by the NEWF co-founder, Mr. Noel Cox. So thank you so much for speaking to us. It's actually quite a fun day for young filmmakers, right? But why is this kind of conference and messaging important in the media space?
I think, film and television is booming all across Africa. Africans are alive and involved in film and television all across Africa. However, in the nature, environment and wildlife space, the African voice is generally missing. For so long, our stories are being told by European and American companies, and, there is an urgent need for us to all respond to the problems that the planet is experiencing. And if we are not part of that conversation, how can we as Africans, contribute and come up with solutions? And so I think that is why it's so important that we have congresses like this on the African soil and create a platform for Africans to participate.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the program you've had from this week up to tomorrow. What opportunities are there for young people who are watching? How can they get involved in telling these stories?
So, over the course of the week or the weekend, we have been announcing opportunities where we are funding, especially emerging young filmmakers, to produce their first films. By the end of this weekend, we have announced funding for over 35 films, short films for stories all across Africa. Opportunities for young people to come on over to the wild side. Like I said, those who are leaving, graduating from film school. Africa, wildlife is synonymous with Africa, and these are stories that have always been a part. In South Africa, our surnames, resonate with wildlife. We are connected to wildlife. And, I always say, how do you change the story? You change the storyteller. And so if we bring more young African storytellers into this process, we can change the narrative. We can refocus the narrative so that increasingly the stories of Africa are told by and from the perspective of African people.
Absolutely. I understand there's even a screening right now, first-time screening of a particular documentary. But, sir, is there a major difference between a story of Africa told by someone, for example, from Hollywood versus someone from Africa like Zambia we're talking today? And is there a change in the impact that story has?
Just the other day, I think it was last week Tuesday, was International Mother Tongue Day. Very often, the stories where we need to make change need to be heard. The communities that live next to the parks do not, very often, they want to hear these stories in their own languages. If we want to communicate those important messages, we need to tell them in their own languages. We need to, with young Africans telling these stories, we bring a perspective that is not normally told. In the past, if you look at all these great big natural history and nature and wildlife documentaries, it's always got nature separate from people. We have always been a part of nature. We are not separate from nature. And that's the perspective that we believe Africans are bringing to this kind of storytelling.
So, of course, in current times, young people are looking in professions like law, accounting, professions that are seemingly more profitable than the arts industry. What are your experiences here for young people who are looking at the arts industry, filmmaking, for example? Do you think that there is a space to work in your passion and be financially stable?
Yeah, wildlife filmmaking, whilst it's not easy, right, is very lucrative. Okay, as I said, a lot of the international companies still do. There's a great appetite for Africa's wildlife all across the world, and so we like I said earlier, we always say to young people, come on over to the wild side. You are naturally connected to wildlife on its own. I know it's expensive to get into this business, but as an organization, what we are doing, and as with our program Africa Refocused, which is a collaboration between NEWF and National Geographic Society, we are breaking down the barriers to entry. We are creating access for young Africans to come into this space. One of the most widely used cameras in this space is a RED, for example, and it is, to hire a RED in this country, one of the higher spec REDs is $1,000 a day. We as an organization are training young people and making these cameras accessible so that they can get that experience, so that when international crews come to Africa, that we can say, yes, I've done a education. Excuse me, I've done a education. I have experience on this camera, and therefore they can get onto these international crews.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. What a wonderful story about the storytellers themselves, particularly here, a call for young people in South Africa, in Africa as a whole, to tell our own stories, particularly about wildlife and the environment. We know that there are many documentaries about this continent, but not necessarily written or produced by people from the continent. So that is what this congress is about, the theme Africa Refocused, and an urge. In fact, there are so many young people in the venue behind me that are now watching a locally produced documentary about drought in Zambia. And as they watch this, of course, they're learning about the technical aspects, like we hear the co-founders say, and learning about the other opportunities they can take up in terms of following suit and creating their own stories in their own areas about the environmental issues they're experiencing, and therefore trying to bring in a community aspect, perhaps also a government aspect as well, to change or better their local environment and protect their natural wildlife matters around them. So, of course, we'll keep you updated on all things filmmaking here from Durban. Back to you.
Karinda Jagmohan, live to us from the Nature, Environment and Wildlife Filmmakers Congress in Durban. Thank you.